Hello, friends, and welcome. I'm Cassidy Carson, and this is The Life of a Writer. Today, I want to talk a little bit about misfits and feeling like we don't fit in. JT and I rewatched the classic movie The Misfits last night, starring Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe, filmed in northern Nevada and released in 1961. The movie is black and white, and the screenplay was written by Arthur Miller, who was Marilyn Monroe's husband at the time. The Misfits is a classic movie and still resonates with a lot of people, including JT and myself. It's also a rather thoughtful and thought-provoking movie, which is why I decided to discuss it here with you today, because it got me doing some introspection, and I think it was building on things that I had already been thinking about, because I'm trying to build a community here, and JT and I are trying to build a community with our Two More Books company. We're finding that we're having a challenging time with it because I think both he and I would feel very strongly that in many senses we are misfits. We are older, of course, which everyone gets to at some point, so that's not the issue here. The issue is that I think that both of us have spent our lives feeling like we don't quite fit in, and we're always a little bit different or off kilter from the people around us. And I think a lot more people are realizing that these days, that there is a lot of discussion about things like neurodivergence and ADHD and autism and whatever anyone believes about those things. I think more of us would relate to the fact that humans are such varied creatures that even though we are so similar in so many ways, our similarities end with our personalities and how certain things present in our bodies and our minds. So I'm sure everybody at some point can relate to the idea of feeling like a misfit. Going back to the movie, the characters of Rosalind and Gay, who are Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable, they're both at maybe different places in their lives. Marilyn Monroe's character is just getting a divorce, which is why she's in Reno, because at the time, quickie divorces in Nevada were something that really attracted people to our state. And she went to the Washoe County Courthouse, which is a location that JT and I are very familiar with because the building is near the Riverside Gallery, where the Sierra Arts Foundation and Sierra Arts Literary Community meet. So we're there on a regular basis. And the streets, that's Virginia Street there, and there is a bridge near the Riverside Gallery that crosses the Truckee River. So that plays into the Misfits in that Marilyn Monroe and her companion Isabel, they are walking north along Virginia Street, and they cross the river on the Virginia Street Bridge. And that's where the famous scene happens where Izzy tells Rosalind, excuse me, that she should throw her wedding ring in the Truckee River. That, from what I understand, is a myth, and it has been discussed at length, so I won't go too far into that right now. I'm more interested in the relationships and how the people are presenting in this movie. And Rosalind is feeling very out of place. Now, at some point we learn that Izzy also came to Nevada to get a divorce, decided to stay. She was originally from Virginia, and she felt as though she didn't fit in there. She wasn't soft-spoken enough or ladylike enough to fit in with Virginia society. So she felt much more at home in Nevada. And she is one of the people that recommends that Rosalind stay in Nevada and try to figure out who she is. Excuse me a moment. I think my allergies are acting up again. So they run into a couple of men, Guido and Gay. Gay is played by Clark Gable. And these two men convince them to go for a drive out to Guido's house, which is near Pyramid Lake. And this is another area that JT and I are very familiar with, having been in Nevada for a very long time ourselves. And it is remote at that time. It was filmed in 1960, so Reno and the surrounding areas were much smaller, as was Las Vegas in those days. So it was a much more remote area, and people who settled here, I think they felt a lot more freedom from the restrictions of society because they were able to get out. And Gay, Clark Cable's character, I believe it's short for Gaylord, he talks about the earth and the sky and feeling that connection and getting up in the morning when you want and doing what you want. And there is still a lot of that in Nevada, especially in the rural areas. A lot of people settle in this state who feel like they want to get away from the restrictions of a lot of modern society, things like HOAs, because JT and I purposely bought a house that is not in a community with an HOA. It is an older house. It was moved to this property. And while we do fall under city regulations, so we do have to keep a certain level of standards on our property. And we can't do certain things like build fences over a certain height, et cetera, et cetera. HOAs can be much more restrictive. And actually, all three of our kids live in HOA communities. So we see the frustrations involved with HOAs. For example, them saying you can only paint your house certain colors, or different shades of certain colors. You can't just paint your house whatever you want. So those kind of things are less common in rural areas or in communities that don't have HOAs. And that kind of thing attracts certain people. There is also a lower cost of living in Nevada. We don't have state income tax, which can be problematic because state income tax helps to pay for infrastructure for our communities. What we have are gaming taxes and fees related, like resort fees, for example. So if you're staying at a hotel in Reno or Las Vegas, you're going to be paying resort fees that go into our tax base. So really, our taxes are more on the visitors than people who live in the state. And for good or ill, for example, California does have high taxes and high cost of living. So many people move from California to Nevada, myself included, back in the day. But I was brought here while I was still a minor with my parents, and left not long afterward, but came back and have been here for more than 30 years since we came back. So I feel much more of a kinship to Nevada and a lot of the people here now than I did in those days. It was quite the culture shock moving here from California after having grown up in the Central Valley where it's very agricultural, and moving to a place that felt so barren because at one point I did live in Empire. My dad worked for the U.S. gypsum plant out there before that shut down, and that was wild. If you've watched the movie Nomadland, you will see some of that area and how harsh it is. Now I find it a harsh beauty. At the time, I hated it. Being a senior in high school and being moved from a class of several hundred students to a graduating class of 6 was challenging for sure. And I just wasn't feeling it at that time. I would be much more agreeable with that experience now, but I've grown and matured and I've experienced other things. So even though I didn't feel like I fit in then, I probably would have fit in better these days. And that's kind of been the theme of my life at this point. I always feel as though I'm a misfit, maybe in the wrong place at the wrong time. The fact that I got the job at the Nevada State Archives back in 2006, so it would have been 20 years this year and actually my original intention was to retire this year, not 2 years ago, because I'll be retired 2 years next month. The fact that I felt so at home there was one of the reasons I stayed so long, because I worked with a group of people who were also probably considered misfits in many senses, because we were all very fascinated by history, fascinated by structure, things like records management. There's a very structured system to managing records, especially for something like state government. And we had kind of our own timetable. So, working in the archives, it was much slower paced. I was able to discover my talents in that area on my own timetable, which I think more of us could really benefit from in the world in general. But society now is so fast paced, technology changes so quickly. It's hard to feel like you find a stable footing and to feel like you fit in, especially as an older person like myself. I'm sure younger people, since they're more digital natives who are in, they're more used to rolling with the times and how quickly things change. Whereas someone my age really grew up in a time where things were slower paced. Even though we were starting to evolve into the modern society, we did develop computers probably prior to my lifetime, and they became more commonly used in my early adulthood. So I am familiar with and comfortable with a lot of forms of technology, but I'm not a digital native. So I don't evolve quite as quickly to the times as maybe modern society would want me to. And that was one of the reasons I decided to retire when I did, because as we have today, it was snowy. We had several snow days in a row, which the state had a snow day, I think one snow day and two delayed starts. So this basically is the time of year that I decided to retire, because I had stayed home for a few days and I started to feel more relaxed and more myself, and hadn't realized that maybe my job had started stressing me out because digital electronic records were becoming more commonplace. There were changes in archival procedures dealing with electronic records that I was having a hard time keeping up with. I was trying to help transition the archives to a new system of tracking our records. So we had been using analog sources. We had printouts at some points of our boxes and box locations, and we were trying to update that so that we could scan things in using barcodes, barcoding our shelves, barcoding our boxes so that they could be checked in and checked out and they wouldn't necessarily have to stay in the same location all the time. And I struggled for several years trying to help implement this new system that ended up, after I retired, I believe they scrapped it because it was just not working out. And this was really stressing me out because I felt like it was a failure on my part when it was really, the system was not suited for the uses that we were trying to use it for, basically. So, all that to say, I was starting to feel like a misfit again in an environment that I had been very comfortable in for many years, more than a decade. And that's what led to my retirement. So, here I am again in a new part of my life. JT and I have our comfortable routine. We're much more able to do what we want when we want, but we are also trying to fulfill a dream that we've both long had by writing and publishing books. We decided to try to give what we're doing more legitimacy by creating an LLC, partially for the legitimacy aspect and partially because it is a financial protection for us and for our personal finances in case something goes wrong with our publishing journey. We're trying not to overcommit ourselves financially, but you never know what might happen. So that was partially as protection for us and our finances as retirees who need to rely on what we've saved up to get us through, the remainder of our lives, basically. And that, it's a niggling stress. We're okay right now. I'm sorry, excuse me again. We are okay right now, but you never know when outside forces might change that. One of my uncles was working for a city and he retired just as the city went bankrupt. So he lost his retirement and he had to actually go and start a new career when he had planned to just enjoy living on his retirement, because he had worked very hard for many years, worked his way up through the system, and then the rug was pulled out from under him just as he was retiring. So those kinds of things can happen, and there's always that niggling feeling that we need to do more to try to take care of ourselves. It can be hard, especially when we feel like we don't fit in. As we're getting older, we may feel like we fit in less and less. We feel more like misfits, because I know for myself, in many cases, I feel like my time has passed. That was something I was feeling at the archives, that I fit in really well there for a period of time. My coworkers retired, my supervisor retired, the culture in the office was shifting, younger people were coming in with different ideas, and that kind of thing is normal. It's normal progression, normal change, but it makes it hard to feel like you're in your comfort zone, and especially after you've been in a comfort zone for so many years, to feel like you fit in when things are changing around you. Going back to the movie The Misfits, this is something that happens to Clark Gable's character. He's been living out in the rural areas for I guess, his entire life. He is divorced, he has adult children. Um, he doesn't seem to be connected to them, possibly because he feels that he's a bit of a maverick, maybe. He's an old cowboy. He's spent years rounding up wild horses, which is, you know, I won't even go into the details about all the issues related to wild horses in Nevada, but he he was rounding up wild horses at a time when people wanted to take them in and use them for riding purposes. And I have mixed feelings about that these days. I grew up riding horses. I love horses. I don't know that I would get on a horse these days, because I don't feel like um, I should put a horse through something like that kind of stress. But he, at that time, and I, when I was younger, felt like, riding horses was just a normal part of life in the area where we were. Over time, the wild horse roundups were for companies that were turning the horses into dog food. And Marilyn Monroe's character Rosalind comes into this. She's enamored with the wild, rugged beauty of Nevada. She's enamored with Gay. She's enamored with Guido. She's kind of feeling discomfort about certain aspects of their character, because both Guido and Gay are, you might call them manly men. Guido talks about his time in the war and the fact that he was a bombardier, and he's still something of a pilot who likes to live on the edge of things, whereas Gay is, the cowboy type. He's done rodeo, he's rounded up wild horses, and while she's seeing the beauty of this new world around her, she's also seeing the harsh realities of it. And a big part of the story revolves around her making these men realize that maybe the life that they thought was so great isn't. That several of the men around her are making comments about how she's something like a breath of fresh air. She's brought life to them after a period of time where they kind of felt maybe they were stagnating. They were just, life was what it was, and nothing new or exciting happened. And I do feel that's something that we really struggle with as we get older. I know I have. That I've had a certain set of beliefs over the course of my life based on my life experiences, my upbringing, and I'm finding out over time that some of those beliefs really aren't the positive aspects of life that I believe them to be. I've learned so much, especially since having kids. My kids have been more proactive about learning outside the lines of what we're taught in regular school. And I didn't really spread my wings in an educational sense until well into my adulthood. I earned my degree 15 years ago this year. And so obviously I'm 62 now. I was an older non-traditional student when I graduated. And it took me a long time to start really discovering that a lot of the things I took for the absolute truth were a matter of perspective to a certain demographic. And so a lot of that is fed into me feeling more and more like a misfit in a world that I felt presented a certain way. And now, especially these days, I'm finding that that world is really not what I thought it was. And I think a lot of us are struggling with that feeling right now, that people who have had a very strong set of beliefs over the course of their lives, no matter what age you are, you're finding that maybe those beliefs aren't what you thought they were. And that feeling of being a misfit, I think, is becoming much more common, especially as people are learning more about neurodivergence. And, we're learning more about the fact that we're not all absolutely carbon copies of each other, even though we are so, so similar in so many ways. Biologically, the human body is what it is. The people who aren't quite the norm when it comes to the human body for various reasons, either physical, emotional, or mental, we don't easily fit into a society that has been created in such a way. I mean, part of it is that we have to make, I don't know, not exceptions. I'm losing words right now. We have to work together to have our society function. And in order to work together, we agree to a set of societal rules and regulations, whether they're written or whether they're just something that people have passed along through the generations. We try to work within these structures so that our society works as a whole. And we're finding that we've been following maybe a set of societal rules that really weren't optimal for a majority of the public. We are dealing with a lot of rules and regulations that have been put in place to benefit certain groups of people. And the rest of us, the majority of society, now we are starting to feel like misfits in a world that we thought was our comfort zone. So I think we're all feeling very much misfits these days, that we're all, not quite what we should be. And social media does not help things, because we all see the influencers, the people who rise to the top of the algorithms, who get the most views. These are the people who are maybe pushing certain products. They look a certain way, they act a certain way, and the rest of us may aspire to be more like that, but it's not real life. There are so many different filters that can be used to make a person look and sound different than they actually are in real life. And there are so many different versions of AI now that can actually put words into somebody's mouth that they aren't actually saying. So we are taking what we're being presented on social media as the absolute truth. We're aspiring to do things that maybe really aren't possible in real life. And I think it's really creating a lot of distrust, and when I say distrust, it's not just with society, but we're starting to not trust ourselves and our decisions and the things that we can accomplish. So I hope that if you're watching this, and if you watched this all the way through, this actually ended up not being at all what I intended to discuss in the beginning, but it evolves as I'm trying to explain what I'm thinking. It went a little bit more in depth than I intended into the idea of misfits in society, and the fact that maybe most of us feel like misfits a lot of the time. So if you followed along this far into the video, if you are feeling like this really speaks to you, I hope you'll take a moment to step back, really pay attention to what you're consuming, talk to people, find out that others are probably feeling very much the way you are, unless you are an influencer of some kind, unless you are one of the really wealthy people who have been so well protected over generations. I think we're all feeling a little disenfranchised, maybe, and I think we're all feeling a little bit like misfits. If you haven't seen the movie The Misfits, I highly recommend it. It is a slower movie, it is a very thoughtful movie. There were challenges going on with the actors during the filming. Clark Gable died not long after they filmed, and really, no, he actually passed away before the movie was released. He was 59 years old and he had a heart attack. Marilyn Monroe, it was also her last movie. She was filming another movie a couple of years later, I believe, when she passed away from what has long been said was an overdose, whether accidental or on purpose, we don't know. So both of them had health problems. Marilyn Monroe was hospitalized during filming, and it comes out in their performances. You can see that they're a little shaky. That may be why the movie resonates so much, even now. The fact that they were both very well-known actors. Clark Gable was past his prime because he would have been really big in the late 1930s and the 1940s, around the time Gone with the Wind came out, whereas Marilyn Monroe, she was huge in the 50s going into the 60s, so she was starting to age out of the ingenue, being cast because of her beauty. She's a very beautiful woman, and that really shows up in their performances, that maybe they're a little past their prime. They're going through all these challenges in real life that's coming out in the performances they're giving in this movie. And Arthur Miller, who was Marilyn Monroe's husband at the time, wrote the part for her. And I think maybe initially when he wrote it, based on trivia, and we have to take it with a grain of salt, it sounds like he initially wrote it as a vehicle, a starring vehicle for her to show her acting range. But by the time they filmed the movie, their relationship was ending, and I don't know, he had lost his interest maybe in Marilyn. I don't know if it was her issues that caused him to lose interest, or if him losing interest maybe played into her issues. We can't really know what was going on in her relationship, but the way the movie turned out was very harsh, and her character does look like she's having a lot of mental and emotional challenges throughout the course of the movie that I think a lot of us can relate to. That we're questioning our place in life, our place in society. We don't know where we feel comfortable. She's questioning the institution of marriage. She's questioning these men on their, masculine beliefs and what they're doing with their lives. And there's a lot to relate to in this movie, even though it is more than 60 years old now. It's 65 years old. That some things just never change. And if you're feeling this way, if you're feeling like a misfit, if you've stumbled across this video, I hope this discussion helps you to feel a little bit better. I can't make you, no one can make you really feel better. But I think sometimes the idea that you're not the only one struggling with a certain issue, if it's something that you've never really experienced before and you feel like you're very alone in your experience, coming across something like this discussion might help you feel at least less alone, and maybe give you the opportunity to put into words some of the things that you've been thinking and feeling. I know that is something that, for all the downsides of social media, I'm finding the upside is finding people who are posting things that resonate with the way I'm feeling right now, because my family is famously not long-lived. I did not have a close relationship with my adult relatives, or I did not in my adulthood. I'm getting tongue-tied. As an adult, I did not have a close relationship with my elders. Let's put it that way. My JT and I moved away. We did a lot of things solo for more than a decade before moving back into close proximity with our extended families. So we had a period of time where we became very individualistic, and we weren't getting a lot of the advice and life experience from our elders that maybe would have helped us navigate that decade that we spent away from them. I think this is also a an issue with a lot of modern society is that we don't tend to stick with our family unit. As adults, we're encouraged to go out on our own, to make our own way in the world, and that's great up to a point. But we don't get a lot of the wisdom from the elders who've been through things we've experienced, not telling us what to do, but telling us what happened to them so that we can see that maybe the things that are happening to us aren't new and unique. And it helps to allay a lot of the fears we may be facing out in the world on our own. So, again, if you followed all the way through on this video, I really appreciate your time. I know it got a little deeper than I expected. I really am trying to put into words things that I am thinking and feeling in the hopes that maybe somebody else might benefit from my thought processes, because maybe you can't figure out quite what's going on with yourself. And that's one of the things I'm trying to do with this channel. I have been looking at how to improve my reach and, how to promote my books. And yeah, that's great. It would be awesome if people read my books. I still hope for that. And some of what I'm trying to talk about here, I hope is coming out in my writing, that maybe I'm trying to provide information that will help you do a little soul searching, or my readers to do a little soul searching. So I'm hoping that I'm at a point in my life as an elder, as a crone, maybe you might say, that I can help you navigate some of the things that I'm finding challenging, because I did not get that. And I think that's why I started following a lot of elders on social media who, unfortunately, many of them have since passed away because they were elder to me, and I'm in my 60s. So I hope you'll take this video for what it is. It is my attempt to provide encouragement and education. There's not a lot of entertainment, I think, in this video. I think it's a little bit too soul-searching to be entertaining, but either way, I do recommend that you watch the Misfits. Take some time to sit with it. You may have to watch it more than once to really get a lot out of what was put into the movie. And look up the trivia. It is IMDb, which is the Internet Movie Database, has a lot of trivia for the Misfits. That may or may not be true. There are some repeat entries that I would feel may be truer if people found that information from other sources and brought them in. You also have to take all that trivia with a grain of salt, but it may provide you a little bit of insight into what was going on during the filming of the movie. I think the biggest thing to take away from it is that we're all human, we're all struggling, we're all facing challenges that other people may have or are facing, may have faced or are facing. I can speak English. Oh, but it is, life is hard. I think we all feel like misfits at some point, especially now that we're more willing to admit that so many of us may have issues that were unrecognized for many, many years, where we were all once encouraged to just ignore the few differences that we were expressing in favor of fitting into a certain societal ideal. And I think it is good to cooperate as a society, but we still have to allow enough individualism that we can function as people, as individuals, because otherwise things happen and they don't go well, both internally and externally. I don't know if really any of this has made sense. I'm actually talking through what I'm thinking right now. So if nothing else, this has been more than a half hour now of me just blathering about the things running around in my mind. I have mentioned before that I am having a tough time doing anything in a linear fashion, because one idea sparks another idea, and I go in circles. So thank you again. If you managed to make it this far, I really appreciate it. As I've done in the past, I will ask you a couple questions right now to partially see if you've actually watched this video, and partially because I'm really curious about what you might think. So, my questions for today are: have you seen The Misfits? Were you aware the movie existed? Are you familiar with Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe and their lives? And if so, what are your thoughts about the movie? Did the movie resonate with you, or was it just too much? And are there any similar movies that you would recommend that are very thought provoking and that help you do a little self examination? So, thank you for joining me today on this snowy day here in northern Nevada. I hope it's nice where you are. I hope that you're having a good day and good week so far. Tomorrow is Friday as I'm filming this, so we're looking toward another weekend, and hopefully that is a time for you to take some downtime. I'm aware that not everybody gets a weekend on Saturday and Sunday. Some people may have days off during the week. You may work 6 days a week. You may have other things going on in your life where you don't really get much of a break. So please be kind to yourself. No matter what your schedule is, try to take some downtime when you can. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. I'm Cassidy Carson. This is the life of a writer. Take care.